안녕하세요. Thank you all for coming to my talk. My name is Hamza, and today we're going to be talking about paid ads and how to scale them effectively in 2025. So my last talk here was about making more content. And everybody tells you these days to make more ads. You got to get better content. And, it's good advice, but that's not how performance really comes to scale. The things they don't talk about your funnel, they don't talk about events, they don't talk about how to actually test this content. Because just throwing a bunch of things at the wall doesn't work. So do you have the right funnel that attracts users, engages users in the right way, converts them into paying customers? Do you send back the right events? Do you send back the events properly? Do you have that instrumented properly through your MMP? And are you testing content in an intelligent way such that you get learnings out of your testing instead of just throwing things at the wall? Are you getting better? Are you getting smarter? So today we're going to be going over these 4 pillars that we just talked about. So obviously content is going to be one of them, or what we call creative. But funnel, attribution, campaign structure all play in this ecosystem. And ultimately, if you want to have a large paid ads operation that is profitable, you need to focus on all 4. And there's 4 pieces to this, but there's 2 main pillars. If we think about it, any great paid ad program has 2 main things that combine to make it work. The first is data, and that comes from both your funnel and obviously the attribution that comes with it. And the second is creative. And I'll put the actual testing structure in there because it's not just about having 1 or 2 great ads. It's about having a system that consistently churns out new winning ad ideas and formats. And if you don't have the right testing structure, you're ultimately at a disadvantage. So let's talk about funnels. You can have the best ads in the world, but if your funnel doesn't work, then it doesn't matter. You're not profitable with your paid ads. So great funnels don't just convert users. They also work on identifying the right users. And you'll see this here. This is my favorite meme because I think a lot of life comes down to this. You can do 2 things. You can either stake them straight to a paywall, just show it right up front, and this actually kind of works. So you can have a very simple strategy. You can immediately get users into the app, get them in a free trial. Or you can have a very long quiz funnel where you're asking them questions, you want to get an understanding of what they actually are looking for, and then you take them to a paywall. But do not do the middle. Do not try to balance, low friction with high friction. Do not try to overcomplicate it. Either you're going for a very extensive quiz funnel, or you're going for a very simple paywall, kind of hard paywall strategy. And obviously, there's exceptions to this rule, but generally, you want to keep it on either the very simple side or the very high IQ side. And more on funnels specifically. These are kind of 2 numbers that are really critical when we look at apps to evaluate, hey, can you scale with paid ads? The first is, are enough of your onboarding seeing a paywall? You want that number to be as high as possible. You want at least 80%, ideally even more. And second is, of the installs that you have, how many convert into paying users? And our golden number is at least 4. And the best apps probably have 10% plus. And if you're not converting at that level yet, then you should probably test other things. You should test other things in your funnel. You should test that quiz-based funnel. You test showing a paywall earlier, gating more features. And on the gating more features topic, by the way, for more kind of best practices, I did a podcast with Jake Moore, who's the CEO of Superwall. They're kind of like RevenueCat. I think they're partner with RevenueCat. But we talk a lot about best practices for funnels, how to actually make paywalls that convert. So this is a QR code if you want to check out that podcast. But generally, with Korean apps specifically, I'll be honest, you guys are very nice people, and your apps reflect that. American apps are very direct. They're very aggressive. They'll tell like, hey, just pay us. Korean apps, the more Korean apps that I meet, the more I realize that because this very nice user interface, it's very great user experience, but ultimately it leads to lower conversion, right? Paywalls aren't shown enough. Too many features are given out for free. Compare that to American apps where it's very direct marketing and very direct paywalls. You go in, a lot of American apps, you cannot even use them without subscribing for a trial. And I don't know any Korean apps that are hard paywalled like that, but it's a very common strategy in the US. Obviously, that means more users churn. Obviously, that means like less retention for products. So it's a balance. You don't want to be too aggressive, but you also don't want to be too nice. And I think a lot of Korean apps can benefit from the American approach of just going direct to more revenue generating paywalls, more aggressive monetization. So that's that about funnel. The second thing I wanted to talk about is attribution. And this goes hand in hand with your funnel. Ultimately, and again, goes down to content. If you're not sending back the right events, how are you supposed to understand what content is working, right? If you don't have, trial events sent back or you can't attribute properly, how do you know which content is actually driving results? You don't. And with the right event setup, you can set up the right framework for your creative and user acquisition teams to actually improve week over week. First, a little bit about real-time tracking. On the event and attribution stuff, you should definitely use real-time tracking whenever it's available. Obviously, Scan has a natural delay, at 24, 48 hours. The more real-time tracking you can get, especially on platforms like Meta and TikTok, the better they're going to work. So Meta already had their real-time tracking solution for a while, aggregated events measurement. TikTok just rolled out theirs recently. If you don't have access, you should ask your rep or talk to me after. But it's better for optimization. It's better for testing. And honestly, I also think it's more accurate at low scale compared to Scan. See, why is this so important? The reality is, ultimately, these platforms learn on signals. Facebook, TikTok, Meta, these platforms don't understand your business. You just tell them, hey, I want the lowest cost per install, or I want the lowest cost per paying customer or subscriber. And there are weak signals and there are strong signals. And by signals, we mean events, right? Like these events are ultimately what's being optimized for in the back end. So a weak signal path would be, I don't know, maybe just an install, right? A lot of people can install an app. But a very strong signal path can be like a trial or purchase. So if you're optimizing for a weak event like an install, expect to get a lower quality of user. Now you'll get a lot more users, but the average quality might be less. With a strong signal path, you get lower amount of users, but higher quality that monetize better. And frankly, you probably always want to go for less users that are higher quality than more users that are lower quality. And there's three things that you can do there. Obviously, set up your SDK well or MMP. Airbridge can help with that. And then ensure you're getting enough events, right? If you're only getting 5 purchases a day attributed, then it's just not enough events to actually optimize against. And choose events that, given this volume constraint, choose events that make sense for you, for your stage. If you're a very large app, you can probably go pretty down funnel and go for very high intent events. But if you're an early app, maybe you have to settle for a trial or maybe a registration or something like that. And there's a trade-off, right? This is what we deal with every day on the paid ad side. You can have very high frequency events. So think about a click. A click happens quite often. A lot of people click ads, right? But just because someone clicks an ad doesn't mean they're a good customer for your app. Now, an install happens a little bit less, but it's higher signal, and you can kind of go down the funnel. The more down funnel you go, the higher the signal is of quality. However, it happens less. So at a certain point, if you only have, 1 subscriber coming in a day, that's not enough data to optimize against. So maybe you should go for something that's higher frequency, like an install. But the idea is, as long as you're getting enough events, you should try to go down funnel as much as possible. So if you're getting a lot of purchase events, try to optimize as much as possible for that purchase event. And there's a lot of trade-offs that will come here, and this is what we call like signal engineering. How do you effectively design a system that, like a funnel that can effectively send back signals to the platform and do it in a smart way, balancing frequency and quality. Now, with that being said, it's not rocket science. There's a lot of very simple events you can send back. So obviously, everyone sends back installs. Installs is a very critical event. But also send back signups, onboarding completions. Maybe if there's like a specific level achieved within your app of like, okay, this customer completed 5 minutes of engagement or something like that. Paywall views, trial starts, purchases. You should be sending back all these events to the platform, and also making sure that you're setting up your Scan 4.0 schema to get the most understanding of long-term cohorts. Now, the best UA teams can get pretty creative. So obviously, we talked about like the standard events, right? Like everyone's sending these back. You can get pretty creative with what events you send back. And this is where we get into things like synthetic events and what actual signal engineering is. And I'll give you a couple examples. And this is kind of the battle that you have to kind of play. So this synthetic events idea, for example, right? Let's say your app, users don't pay on the first day. Users only pay on day 10. I don't know, for whatever reason. But you know that if a user opens the app twice in D0, then they're very likely to make a purchase on day 10. So optimize for that event. Make a custom event for opening the app twice. Maybe if a user uses a certain feature, like a lot of apps, for example, rely on Apple Watch, right? And if there's no Apple Watch integration, then the app is pretty useless. So maybe it's about like having an Apple Watch. It's like an Apple Watch event, and you just optimize for users that sync their Apple Watch or sync something. Think about what matters to your app, and think about how to send back an event that reflects that. Essentially, what you're trying to get at is what is a good measure of quality that I can send back to a Facebook or a TikTok in the form of an event. Facebook famously, when Facebook was first starting, they wanted to understand what makes users use Facebook, what makes users stick on their platform. And famously, it was like, if they had 7 friends on Facebook, they would keep using the app. And that was the magic number for them. It was like 7 friends on the app meant that a user would become a long-term user. Find out what that metric is for you. If you have a very classic subscription app, it probably is just a purchase, I'll be honest. But if you have a more complicated product, this is where you can really shine with your paid ads. Now, campaign and account structure. Obviously, these days, creative is number 1. And your campaign structure should reflect that. Should have fewer campaigns. That way, you get more signal around your creative and make smarter decisions overall. Generally, we have 3 campaign types. There's creative testing, there's scaling campaigns, and there's retargeting campaigns. And obviously, this is just very broad, but generally this works pretty well. Even accounts that are spending $1 million a month, you generally don't want to have too many campaigns in them. So creative testing is what it sounds like. You want to have a dedicated campaign to test new creatives in. Once you find out winners in this campaign, you take them and then you scale them with the scaling campaign. And retargeting is what it sounds like. You want to retarget customers who maybe churned or didn't make a subscription or a purchase. And you don't want to spend too much money on retargeting. Generally, you want to spend most of your money on the scaling campaign. And be aware of automated campaigns. Obviously, Meta, TikTok, they're all pushing Advantage Plus, Smart Plus. They can make sense, but sometimes they don't. especially for testing. So don't test in automated campaigns. It defeats the purpose. You want to have more control over your testing, and that's why you test in manual campaigns. And then for scaling campaigns, you should do automated, A/B test between automated and manual, and see what works better for you. I'd say for niche apps, manual may work better. You may want to use more manual media buying strategies if you have a very niche audience for your app. But if you have a very broad kind of generic value proposition, then you should probably use automated campaigns. And generally, it's what we talk, broad wins, right? Like let the algorithm do the targeting. Avoid using interests. I generally think that does not work anymore. Lookalikes and custom audiences. Again, if you're a niche app, try them. But essentially, you want to stick with broad targeting for most apps. Now, for the juicy part, content. Content is probably the most important lever in paid ads today, right? And it's something that a lot of people just get wrong. It's not about more content. It's about testing the right content. And here's what matters to test in content in order, right? With, essentially, a lot of people focus on the wrong things. I'll tell you, CTAs, they do not matter. A lot of people focus on them, but at the end of the day, if you don't have your positioning right, if you don't have the hook right, it does not matter. So this is how you should think about testing content, these variables in order. And obviously positioning is number one. But at the same time, it's also the most obvious, right? For most apps, there's going to be one or two key features or positionings that just are so much more interesting than the rest, right? Generally, apps are pretty vertical in that way. There's some apps that are horizontal. They have a lot of use cases. They have a lot of different features for different users. But most apps are pretty simple, and you can kind of get a feeling for what your positioning is even before testing ads. You probably already know what is strong and what is weak. Now, format and hook is where you should spend most of your time when testing content. And obviously, everyone knows about hooks. Formats more and more are becoming even more important than hooks. And what I mean by a format is a distinct visual identity, right? The reality is there's so many apps these days. Every app does the same thing. Like the amount of gym planning apps or calorie tracking apps or productivity apps, there's 100 of them. How do you stick out? It's not actually by having so much more engaging of a hook. It's by looking different visually. And I'll show you an example. I compiled some different formats, and I think that the team will play it. So you have your classic UGC here on the left. Just someone talking to a camera, maybe some B-roll screen recordings. This is something that we did for Binance. And it's just a simple ad. Here's kind of a step up. This is street interview creative. So it looks visually different. It's engaging in a different way. It automatically kind of gives the app social proof. It's like, OK, someone's actually using it. Now, these were actors, but it doesn't matter. It looks authentic. It looks organic. And this is, can we play it again, the videos? And this is what we call a fake podcast ad. Again, if something's on a podcast, it must be important, right? So how do you communicate these things visually instead of saying them? That's more and more where you should be spending your time, is visual hooks, visual formats, and trying to make ads that don't feel like ads. But again, UGC still works. We still do a lot of it. It's just for the next level in paid ads, you want to take it a step further with creative formats. Oh wait, I guess I can. And then obviously creator, body, call to action. Every part of the ad matters. There's just some that matter more. Once you figure out a winning format, you want to go vary the creator. Let's say you tried out young female creators. Go for an old dude that makes the same ad concept. Different creators naturally reach different audiences, and you want to be able to capitalize on that. Now, the body is important, right? It's basically whatever happens after the hook, how you talk about the product, and then the CTA, obviously. But I would say those two are secondary to everything else that we discussed before. And a lot of people struggle with inspiration. So I kind of compiled a few ways that we like to get inspiration. We make 2,500 ads a month at this point, so we need a lot of inspo to go through that. The first one, obviously, is competitor ads. Look at what your competitors are doing. But if you're already leading the market, it's kind of a bad strategy. The two things that have been gold mines for us is the comment section. Look through the comment section of your ads and find what people are talking about, because that is going to be golden for content. A lot of the times, we'll actually just take a comment and use it as a hook, as a negative hook. Like maybe someone's talking trash about the product. Oh, this product sucks because X, Y, and Z. And then we kind of flip it back and tell them, oh no, like it's good because of X reason. And obviously qualitative insights. A lot of people don't do this enough because they're so married to the data. This is where creative is an art, right? You want to do user interviews. You want to look at Reddit forums, Facebook groups. Find out where your customer lives and try to get an understanding for their life, for their language, and how they think about X problem. And this is where I would say your biggest wins are going to be. The qualitative insights is unlocking big creative wins. And generally, we have a philosophy of learn or earn. That's like what we tell the teams. Like day one, either we're learning or making money, and if the campaign does neither, then it should be turned off. So don't just throw things at the wall. Make sure every creative has a reason to be tested. Test one variable at a time, and make sure that after the creative test is over, you're extracting learnings, figuring out what worked, what didn't, and why. Sometimes that's not immediately obvious, and you need to do a lot more testing, and you need to look at trends, long-term patterns, but generally you're able to get an insight or two out of every batch of creative that you do, and that's how you keep the boat moving. And test smart. You don't have to test on more than one platform. Test on one platform, 80% of learnings transfer, and use leading indicators. Let's say your goal is a good cost per purchase, but you have an ad that already is twice the average CPI. Turn it off. You don't need to spend more money on an ad that clearly proved that it didn't win. So we automated the system for us, like in our agency. We have a framework it's called Framework, is the system, and we basically compute a confidence score each hour of the day if a creative is going to be performing or not based on leading indicators and the actual KPI. But you can also do this manually. It's just a lot easier to do automated. So I'm running out of time. So we covered the 4 pillars, right? The 4 levers, but ultimately they come down to 2 pillars. What I want you to leave this talk thinking about is, how do I make sure I'm sending back the right data? And how do I build a testing engine instead of just thinking about the next ad, right? The next ad is always very exciting to think about, but how do you build the operation such that you can take creative and turn it into profitable campaigns is ultimately what you need to do as a paid ad marketer. Did this little thing, ChatGPT AI generated in the spirit of AI. Ultimately, it's a loop, right? Like you want to first understand what resonates to users about your product. You take those insights, you turn them into engaging content, you find out what's working and what's not through better attribution, and you analyze that through some sort of creative analytics platform or maybe manually yourself. And what underpins all of this is what it's Eric's, I think his last name is Seufert. Credit to him for the term signal engineering, right? Ultimately, you want to design your funnel and attribution in a way that you're sending back the right signals, and that's how this loop keeps going. So thanks for coming. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I have my QR code right there. If you want to learn more about what we do at Newform, you can scan here to learn more. This has been my 3rd MGS, so thanks again for having me, Airbridge. And the folks at Airbridge, I think, also left a QR code survey. I think they'll be happy if you fill it out. Again, thanks for coming. Kamsahamnida, and I'll see you next year.